Every prairie grain farmer has done a gluten test. When you pick up a few kernels of wheat and chew them for a while, you end up with a substance that's similar to chewing gum. That's gluten. At Winnipeg's Canadian International Grains Institute, or CIGI, the test is a little more sophisticated. Christina Pizzi of CIGI's Analytical Lab explains.
This here is a glutamatic, and it's what we use to wash out the gluten in a flour sample. So I'm actually going to show you the test. So right now it's just mixing the flour, and then it's going to start rinsing it with a salt solution, and it's going to rinse out everything except for the gluten.
But what is gluten, and why is it important to bakers? Rex Newkirk, CIGI's Vice President of Research and Innovation, explains.
In wheat, when we make bread and other products where we leaven the product, you need to have something that acts like a balloon, that allows material to form little bubbles so that you get a final product that's nice and airy and has bubbles. And gluten is a specific type of protein that has the capability to expand and hold the gases. And so this is what we call gluten. It's a particular protein that's found in wheat, particularly in hard wheats have very high concentrations of gluten. And like I say, the best way to describe it is maybe the material that you would make a balloon out of. You know, the surface of that balloon has the ability to expand and to withhold the gases, and that's what gluten does for us in wheat.
That as with many other things in life, balance is also important with gluten.
Canadian wheat typically has been what many buyers would consider to be very balanced. Being a hard spring wheat, and given the climate that we produce it in, and the varieties and the varietal registration system we have, we've been able to produce wheat that is very balanced. You want to have, when the bakers are using product, they want to have something that's strong, that is able to withstand the gases that are forming and keep those bubbles from breaking. But they also have to have some extensibility so the bubbles can expand a little bit and you get some nice little holes, but not big ones. And Canadian wheat, Western Canadian wheat, Canadian Red Spring particularly, has been well known for being a good balance. If it's too strong, then it's like a balloon with too thick of coating around the outside. You have to blow and blow and blow to try to get the darn thing to blow up. And so you end up getting a very small loaf. Or if it's too weak, it blows up and breaks and you end up with this loaf that falls apart. Or if there's any movement in the baking process, it can't handle it, and when it's proofing, it'll just collapse and you'll get really poor. So Canadian Western Red Spring wheat has been very balanced. It's had not too strong, but just the right amount of strength, not too weak. So it's what we call, many would call it medium, meaning it's got the right band. So when they're bringing in other wheats and stuff, it brings that sort of level characteristic to it. Part of our job each year is to gather commercial samples, analyze those as quickly as possible, and go out to the customers and show them, you know, if you buy 100,000 tons or whatever, this is what you should expect from it relative to the year before. And just like when a producer's producing, some years you get higher protein than others, or some years you get higher yield or whatever because of weather or other circumstances. The same thing's true of the gluten strength, that can vary a little bit. A number of years ago, there was actually some arguments that we were too strong. We know that varieties have changed. Producers, you know, each year we have new varieties coming out, and the varietal registration system is designed to look at those varieties and determine if they fall within that band. But there's room for error within this band, and so some of the varieties we pick are very strong, you know, relative to that band, and some are a little bit closer to the bottom end. And we're seeing some of the very popular varieties tending to be a little bit closer to the bottom side of the band than the top. At the same time, we've looked at other varieties like Carberry and Glen and some of these, and they've been very much on the top end of the spectrum. And so the hope is that by having a range of varieties, that when it gets to the customer, it's a blend of many of those. And so even if you do have weaker ones, it shouldn't throw you out of range.
One of the questions is whether agronomic practices affect gluten strength, including fungicides, fertility, and pre-harvest glyphosate.
Could some of these farming practices, some of these tools we have available to us, could they change that gluten strength, either making it stronger, weaker, delaying it, speeding up the maturity and the development process? So we're looking at things like fungicide. Many people are using fungicide now to control things like fusarium, to allow that plant to be healthier and to lay down more protein. And so one of the questions we have is, well, now that we're using those products, does that change the gluten strength? Does it delay it? Does it, and if so, are there ways to manage that? For example, as I mentioned, there's varieties that are in the higher band and there's varieties in the lower band. If we find that, say, a fungicide makes some varieties weaker, if they're in the lower band, we don't really want them to get outside of that range. If they're up in the top band, I don't think you have lots of latitude to go down. So we're looking at fungicide application. We're also looking at nitrogen. As we apply more nitrogen to the soil, we get higher protein in the wheat. Does that equate to higher quality gluten? Another area that has been suggested, and we've got some plots that are, some samples that are coming in this fall, looking at pre-harvest glyphosate. So people are putting on the glyphosate to dry down the crop to get a kill of weeds. Is this impacting gluten strength or delaying it?